The old men at the feed store in Havre, Montana, have a name for August Bellamy. They call him the fool on the ridge. They say it to his face, which is the kind of honesty the frontier practices without. Apology August is 54 years old with a beard the color of iron filings and hands so thick-knuckled they no longer lay flat. He wears a canvas duster in August. They're not wrong to say it means something. It means he is always thinking about winter in the autumn of 1903. While other men square their logs and bank foundations, August Bellamy is doing something that makes men stare. He is building his new cabin in a triangle, not a rectangle, but a blade pointing north into the prevailing wind. Neighbors ride by and pull their horses to a stop. Amos Deering leans from his saddle with a grin like a fence gate. August, you lose your square somewhere? Deering asks. Or did you just go and lose your mind? August keeps driving his wooden stakes into the hard Montana earth. He says nothing to the macaron. The horse. Deering shakes his head. That thing'll catch the wind like a damn sail and fly apart. For February, what nobody knows is that the triangle isn't foolishness, it is geometry, the result of 11 years of watching. It will cost him everything he has left to build it. He cannot afford to be wrong on this ridge. August Bellamy comes to this ridge by way of a life that has been worn down to its very bones. He'd had a wife, a daughter, and a proper timber frame house with cattle enough to fill a small barn. Then the winter of 1892 comes, the one the old-timers still call the killing winter. His wife Clara dies in January when the cabin temperature drops below zero indoors for 9 days. Running drafts through the log gaps found every flaw. August stuffed them with rags and moss, but the cold found paths. Clara's constitution was worn thin by childbirth, and the cold finished her. Goes to live in Billings. August stands at the wire fence of that farm and watches her small figure disappear into the house. Something breaks. He spends a decade drifting. Logging camps, railroad surveying parties, mulipacking in the Beartooths. He reads and watches the world. A winter in the Helena Public Library. Reading engineering texts, seeking knowledge in the quiet of high dusty stacks. He speaks with Running Hawk, a Blackfoot elder, who teaches him how wind, earth, and stone behave in cold. Now he is $912 in a tin, buried in a rented barn. He is 54 land. Costs $240 materials, $582. Remains no margin, no charity for eccentric loaners. If he has misjudged his calculation, August will freeze to death in a monument to his own arrogance. August is aware of this. It sharpens his attention considerably as he works on the ridge. Triangle design comes to him slowly, like snow building on a flat surface, until the weight of it is undeniable. He watches how square cabins deal with the wind. They don't deal with it, they absorb it. Like a punch, a flat wall presented to a gale is a surface to pound against. Every gap becomes a pathway for infiltration, but a triangle, a sharp point aimed into the north wind, is different wind. Striking the apex splits and deflects. He has seen this in nature: the prow of a boat, the wedge of a bird's beak. Natural survival geometry. Running Hawk describes a winter lodge set with its narrowest point north, maintaining warmth. A straight-walled structure cannot touch. August's primary material makes the neighbors laugh hardest. He is not building with logs, he is building with cordwood. Short sections of split wood set into mortar like bricks, but with the grain running perpendicular to the wall. Deering says it looks like someone stacked kindling and called it architecture. The neighbors call it a garbage pile. August reads about cordwood construction, stackwall masonry, from a French-Canadian builder in Quebec, where the cold is meaner than Montana. The R-value of a 16-inch cordwood wall is nearly triple that of a standard notched log wall found in Montana. Wood fibers trap still air in the grain. Every piece of split tamarack August stacks is a small insulating brick. He mixes mortar with lime, putty sand, and shredded sawdust, a recipe developed over a summer of rigorous testing. He runs 2 beads of mortar along the edges, leaving a gap of dead air between them at the center. That 16-inch deep gap traps a column of stillness that no wind can penetrate and no cold can bridge. He has no power tools, only a crosscut, so a broad axe, a draw knife, and a second-hand spirit level. August works from first light to last through September and into October, when the nights make the cheekbones ache. The first setback comes in October. The mortar in the lower sections is failing. Cracking from ground moisture infiltration, he tears out 4 feet of wall in a morning, undoing weeks of exhausting, meticulous work. It is brutal. He spends 2 days reworking the mix with river sand and Stone bases the calendar presses against his neck. The mill in Havre sends Douglas fir instead of tamarack. The mill hand shrugs, saying tamarack is short. August sends a firm note. The ridge beam and trusses will be tamarack, or he will come to Havre personally. The correct timber arrives 4 days later. The heavy tamarack beams are exactly what the triangular structure requires. He works by lantern light for a week straight, his hands cracking and bleeding, wrapped in cloth, soaked in tallow. Deering comes by in mid-October with Martin Paulson and young Garrett Sims. They ride the fence line. Watching him looks like a woodpile. Had a nightmare. Paulson says Sims laughs too loudly at the cattleman's joke. Deering warns that the chinking won't hold and the pointy roof will peel right off in the first wind. August is on a temporary scaffold pressing cordwood into mortar. He looks down at Deering. You might be right. Deering blinks in surprise. But I don't reckon you are. August adds and turns back to his wall. 2 weeks later, the walls are complete, and the roof frame is rising. It looks like nothing they've seen. Deering sits his horse and looks for a long time. By gum, the old fools. Actually finishing it, the roof is August's final technical challenge. He needs a wind-deflecting geometry with a steep 4 to 5 degree pitch. It is steep enough to shed snow before it crushes the structure and lets the wind push over the ridge. He cannot afford shingles. He uses pine boards, a double layer of tar paper, and heavy insulating living sod. He cuts sod from the meadow, laying it grass done in overlapping courses like massive living shingles across the frame. A foot of packed earth adds thermal mass, retaining solar heat by day and releasing it slowly through nights. It will shed water, resist fire, and costs him nothing but the brutal labor of cutting and lifting it. He finishes the roof on a Thursday in late October. That night the temperature drops to 12 degrees below zero. August sits inside his cabin with a small fire in the rusted iron stove bought for $9.40. He listens for creaks, whistles of air infiltration, or groaning structural members under stress. He hears almost nothing at all. The cabin is small, yet the walls hold the heat with a capacity that startles him. Despite his calculations, he places his bare palm against the interior wall. Cool, not cold, not the aching bitter cold of 1892, 48 degrees, inside 18 below zero. Outside a 6 to 6 degree differential with a modest fire, banked low. He sits with that number for a long moment. He takes the pencil and writes it in the ledger. He feeds the stove one more piece of tamarack. The number settles over him like a warm blanket. He has $1.47 left in the tin. He has spent everything to buy his life back. In early November, the weather turns mild, a deceptive tease of warmth, and a sky that is almost friendly before winter neighbors take the opportunity for final preparations. Deering banks foundations. Deeper. Paulson brings his cattle closer to the barn. Young Garrett Sims patches his roof, considering himself ready. The experienced men exchange looks about him. He doesn't see August uses the mild week to lay in his wood supply. A full cord of split tamarack stacked inside the cabin. He stacks 2 more cords outside, protected under the deep eave overhang of his triangular roof on the east side. He traded 3 weeks of labor for the wood, which Deering accepted as a man doing charity for an eccentric. August seals every settling joint with riverbank clay slip, pressing it into any mortar cracks with his calloused, thick fingers. He fits the window with an interior shutter of wood faced with dried sheepskin, creating a thick insulating double barrier. He finishes by caulking the stovepipe collar with fire clay, ensuring no heat escapes his triangular sanctuary. He adds a storm vestibule at his door, a small outer porch of cordwood scrap, and a heavy canvas inner curtain. Then he sits down and waits. The cabin is silent, a fortress of wood and earth, poised against the horizon. On November 14th, a rancher arrives from the Canadian border with news of a storm building in the Alberta plains. It is larger, colder, and faster than any typical system. The barometric pressure drops like a final grim sentence. August feels it in his knees. The air goes suddenly still. The way sound disappears before a much larger sound. The blizzard strikes at 2 in the morning. It comes out of the north-northwest. At sustained 6 to 2 mile winds, the temperature drops to 38 below. By dawn, the wind screams, and the mercury keeps falling into the void over 3 days. It reaches 58 degrees below zero. Men refuse to believe it until their own thermometers confirm. The nightmare visibility drops to 0 beyond 6 feet. The snow scours windward, faces bare, and piles drifts to rooftop height leeward. In Amos Deering's cabin, the night is a sustained misery. His well-built log walls take the full force of the gale by 3 in the morning. The chinking in the upper corners is forcing out a high, thin whistle, joins the roar Deering and his wife frantically. Stuff rags into every gap, while the fire burns hard, fighting a losing battle against cold. Inside, the temperature drops to 22 degrees. They are tougher than the weather expects, but they are far from safe. Martin Paulsen's cabin, older and less carefully built, loses a section of chinking. The cold comes through the wall like smoke. His stovepipe develops ice on the inside, blocking the draw of fire. Smothers itself as the storm screams outside. Young Garrett Sims is not ready. His roof patch fails, allowing a cascade of wind-driven snow into the attic space. Snow melts and drips down his walls. Sims moves everything to the center of the floor, praying for it to end. In August Bellamy's triangular cabin on the ridge, the night of the 15th is something else entirely. The wind strikes the north apex and splits just as August calculated. Over a decade of watching, August can hear it. A sound anticipated, but never fully experienced. Not the pounding of a square wall, but a division, the angled walls. Channel the split wind, cutting the direct lateral force by more than half compared to a square at midnight. He places his bare palm against the wall outside. It is 4 to 4 below. The wall is cool, not cold. 16 inches of wood and dead air resist the cold with a stubbornness that feels personal to August. He lets the stove drop to a low burn and lies down, trusting the walls of his sanctuary. He wakes at 4:51 degrees inside, 58 below zero outside. He reads the numbers twice: 51 inside, 58 below outside. 109 degrees of difference running through him. Like a current, he says it out loud alone in the dark. 109 degrees. Some numbers need to be spoken. The blizzard screams at the walls, trying every joint, and seem for a weakness it cannot find. The structure holds inside. It is 51 degrees on a fire burned low. He thinks of Clara's cabin, only 8 degrees. He thinks of the rags and drafts moving like ghosts through a structure built from convention. Instead of thought, he puts his hand against the wall again. Cool, not cold. 109 degrees of hard-won difference. He adds 2 pieces of wood. He goes back to sleep, anchored in the silence of his triangular sanctuary. At dawn, he steps into the storm vestibule and opens the door. The wind hits the edge and shears off. The ridge is scoured bare, and frozen white the valley is. Invisible, he closes the door and retreats inside. On the 3rd day, the wind begins to ease in stages. By evening, the snow stops. It is 41 below zero. August opens the outer door of his storm vestibule and steps onto the ridgeline. His breath a thick white plume. The world is white, shaped by wind into sculpted cornices on windward edges and deep hollow scoops on leeward faces. The cabin sits in the shelter of its own geometry, the north face clear of snow directed past the structure. The sod roof holds a layer of packed snow as insulation. Every joint, cordwood piece, and timber remains perfectly intact. August walks down toward the valley, his boots crunching on the frozen crust. As he heads toward Deering's place, Deering is out in the yard examining failed chinking. He looks at August with relief and something harder to name. "How'd you do?" Deering asks. August says, "All right." Deering presses how all right inside. Temperature held above 50 degrees through the worst of it. August says the stove was barely working. Deering is quiet for a long time. He looks at his own failed chinking, then at August. The whole 3 days, Deering takes off his hat, turning it in his hands. "I'll be wanting a long conversation with you." August. Martin Paulsen comes to the ridge on the 4th day, walking because the snow is too deep for a horse. Paulsen stands inside looking at the cordwood walls, and the stove barely warm to the touch. He is stunned. "What did you use in the mortar?" Paulsen asks, writing the answer on the back of his hand. "Could a man do this with a rectangular plan?" Paulsen asks. August explains the importance of the wind geometry. "I said things about your building," Paulsen says quietly out on the road. With Deering, I was wrong. August pours 2 cups of coffee. He sets one in front of Paulsen. "Happens," August says stoically. The Ohio boy Garrett Sims comes on the 5th day. He stands inside August's cabin, recalibrating his every assumption. "I had no idea wood could insulate like that." Sims says. August replies, "Most people don't until they're cold enough." Sims looks at the cordwood wall, at the cut ends face out and the careful mortar lines. "I'd like to learn. You'll haul wood and mix mortar without argument," August says. And in spring you'll know Deal Sims says yes he shows up on a Monday in March. The snow is deep, but the ridge is blown clear by the sun. Sims is wearing the wrong coat for the work, too long, too stiff at the elbows. August says nothing. He picks up Cordwood, cuts mortar, and asks questions. By April, he is competent with the mortaring trowel. By May, Sims is asking questions August has never heard before. A good sign in any young man learning survival. Deering stops by the ridge in April alone to say something he doesn't want witnessed by his peers. Deering wants to build a Cordwood barn addition and asks August to cast an eye on the plans. August refuses payment. Two men, neighbors, through the killing winter, share a silent mutual respect before Deering rides away. The winter of 19,031,904 leaves marks 3 cabins require major chinking repairs. As the frost finally retreats, Paulsen loses his outbuilding wall to freeze-thaw, cycles the logs separate under the massive pressure of the ice in May, August, and Paulsen rebuild the wall using a double-wall technique with a dead-air gap, and sawdust. Paulsen watches everything August does with careful eyes, learning that understanding requires more patience than pride, is usually willing to give in the weeks after the storm. August sits by the iron stove, reflecting on the 11 years spent arriving here. He thinks of Clara, taken by a cold that needn't have killed her. That thought has teeth held for years. Survival truths are never secrets. They are available to any man who looks at the natural world long enough. Running Hawk taught him how the old people set their narrowest wall to the wind, letting shape do the work. The second conclusion is about pride. He has watched men build wrong because they would not admit they didn't know better. He has watched the cold punish that pride. You are right, or you are cold, often both for a while. He writes to his daughter, Me, in Billings. He tells her he has built a house the cold cannot find. The letter back is kind, but careful. She is distant now. He keeps it in the tin that held money. Perhaps you have stood at a decision and been called a fool by people who couldn't see what you measured. Perhaps you felt in your bones that the accepted shape of a thing carried a flaw others chose to overlook. The frontier does not care about consensus. It cares about what works. When the temperature goes to 58 below in that cold, every assumption is tested. Everything false is stripped away by the 8-mile wind, and the North. August Bellamy lives in that cabin for 14 more years. His life anchored to the ridge he finally mastered. He watches it outlast 3 neighbors' houses, a county barn, and a railroad station that blows apart in 1911 in the evenings when the tamarack burns low and the cordwood walls hold the warmth with patient, dense insistence. He puts his bare hand flat against the interior wall and feels the cool that never becomes cold. The fool on the ridge, that is what they called him. They had no idea what he had measured. He never corrects them. He does not need to. The truth is held in the stillness of his walls. The thermometer keeps the record. The cold keeps the score, and in the end, the triangle stands.